My name is Susie Gonzalez. I'm 22 years old, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had my whole life figured out. I was engaged to the man I believed I'd spend forever with, Jeffrey, my first love, my best friend, my everything. We'd known each other since high school, went through college together, and built a small but happy life in our little apartment. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Back then, if someone had told me that love could rot quietly beneath the surface while still looking picture perfect, I would have laughed. I used to think betrayal came with shouting, slamming doors, obvious red flags. Turns out sometimes it starts with a smile, a phone that never leaves the table, and a soft, "It's just an old friend." Jeffrey was 21, charming, clever, the kind of guy who could make you forget the world was hard. He worked part-time in tech support, always glued to his laptop, while I juggled my last year of nursing school and a weekend job at the clinic. We made it work. We always did, or so I thought. It began in small, almost invisible ways. Jeffrey would laugh at something on his phone and lock it the second I looked over. When I asked, he'd say, "Just memes, babe," and kiss my forehead like that would make me stop wondering. I remember noticing that he started dressing a little differently, new cologne shirts I'd never seen him buy. He said he was just switching things up. I told myself I was imagining things. I even scolded myself for being paranoid. After all, he'd never given me a reason to doubt him. We were planning our wedding, saving up for a honeymoon, and arguing about cake flavors, not lies. But the first real crack came one Thursday evening. We were cooking together something that had become our little ritual since we couldn't afford fancy dates. I was chopping vegetables when he said, "Oh, I ran into Mara online today. Remember her?" The name hit something strange in me. Mara was his old high school crush, someone he once described as the one that got away. I remembered how awkward he'd been when she showed up at a reunion a couple years ago. "Yeah, I remember her," I said carefully. "How's she doing?" "She's good," he said with a grin that felt too bright. "We've been catching up, actually. She's hilarious. I forgot how easy she is to talk to." I smiled back, pretending my heart hadn't just dropped into my stomach. Over the next week, Mara became a background character in our life, mentioned casually but frequently. "Oh, Mara said this funny thing today." Mara and I both love that movie. Mara's thinking about changing jobs, too. It was always innocent on the surface, but I could feel the shift. Conversations about our future started fading, replaced with his new inside jokes. Sometimes while I was studying late, I'd glance over at Jeffrey sitting on the couch, smiling at his phone with that half smirk he used to give me. Once I asked, "Who's that?" he replied, "No one important." No one important. Funny how people always say that right before they become the most important thing to lose you. I tried to ignore it. I reminded myself that Jeffrey loved me. We'd survived long distance when I took an internship in another city. We'd shared birthdays, heartbreaks, hospital visits. He wouldn't just throw that away, right? One night while we were watching a show on Netflix, Jeffrey said, "Oh, you'll love this one. It's Mara's favorite." He didn't even realize what he'd said, but I did. Something twisted in my chest. We used to pick shows together, our thing. Now I was watching her favorite. I forced a laugh and said, "Well, I guess Mara has good taste." Jeffrey grinned and kissed my hand, completely missing the tension sitting in my smile. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd become an extra in someone else's story. At the clinic the next day, I tried to distract myself with work. A patient smiled at me and said, "You look tired, sweetheart." Big test coming up. I almost said no, just watching my relationship quietly disintegrate, but instead I smiled and nodded. That evening, Jeffrey came home late, later than usual. He smelled like beer and a hint of perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked where he'd been, he said, "Just out with friends." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the truth was already whispering in my ear, soft but persistent. "You're losing him, and he's not even fighting it." Later that week, I found myself watching him instead of TV, how his fingers danced over his phone, how his smile appeared and vanished when I entered the room, how he'd laugh under his breath at messages I wasn't part of. I told myself not to snoop, not to become that person. Trust is sacred, right? That's what love is built on. But love also makes you blind, and blindness makes you curious. Still, I said nothing. I cooked dinner, kissed him goodnight, and told myself that maybe I was just stressed from work. But when I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, I realized I was waiting. Waiting for the truth to reveal itself in some undeniable way. Waiting for something, anything to justify this growing ache in my chest. The night before everything unraveled, Jeffrey reached over and wrapped an arm around me. His voice was sleepy, careless. "Love you," he murmured. I whispered it back. but it felt hollow, like saying it to a stranger who'd stolen my fiancé's face. That's when I knew. Whatever we had, it was already slipping away, and I was the only one still holding on. I remember rolling onto my side, watching the soft light from his phone illuminate the room. He was smiling again, tapping away at something he didn't want me to see. My stomach turned, but I didn't say a word. I just stared at the glow fading against the wall and thought I told myself not to overthink. I should have listened to my instincts instead. When people talk about heartbreak, they always picture a dramatic moment, a fight, a confession, a door slamming. But the truth is, sometimes it happens in absolute silence when the person you love laughs at a message you'll never read. A week after that sleepless night, Jeffrey came home holding takeout and grinning like nothing was wrong. "Movie night?" he asked, setting the bags on the table. "I found this new show on Netflix. Mara said it's hilarious. You'll love it." He said her name again, so casually, like she belonged in our living room. I swallowed my irritation. "Sure," I said. We spent the night watching it, some romantic drama with sarcastic characters and slow burn tension. He was right, it was good. Too good. He quoted lines before they happened, laughed at parts before I did, because he'd already watched it, with her. Later that night, when he fell asleep, I lay beside him replaying every tiny detail, the way he'd called it our show, how he'd joked that I reminded him of the lead actress. It didn't feel flattering anymore. It felt like I was unknowingly playing a role in their story. The next evening, something happened that broke the thin thread of denial holding me together. Jeffrey was rushing to get ready for work when he left his phone on the couch face up. I swear I didn't plan to touch it. I just glanced. A notification lit up the screen. "Mara, you looked so cute last night. Still thinking about that." Cute, last night. I felt the world tilt slightly, like my body recognized the truth before my brain did. He'd told me he went out with the guys. My hands trembled as I opened their chat. It was like stepping into a version of Jeffrey I didn't know. Flirty jokes, heart emojis, pictures of his lunch, his car, even the sunrise from our bedroom window. He'd sent her that view, our view. Then a message from Mara scrolled into focus. "Mara, you know I used to like you, right, Jeffrey?" Used to Mara. "Maybe still do. Your move, Jeffrey. Guess it's in your court now." I felt something inside me break quietly like glass, cracking under pressure. I scrolled further. Pictures of me. Not many, but enough to hurt. A selfie of us at the park captioned, "Look how happy we look." She'd replied with a laughing emoji and said, "You really are adorable together. Almost too adorable." Almost. The word echoed in my head like a curse. Then I found a photo Jeffrey took secretly while I was carving pumpkins on Halloween. He'd sent it to her with, "She's so serious when she focuses, it's kind of cute." Her reply, "You've got it bad. Or maybe you missed the thrill." I closed the app and stared at the wall. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, throw his phone, demand an explanation, but instead I just sat there, frozen. Maybe that's the cruelest part of betrayal. The moment it happens, your voice disappears. When Jeffrey came back into the room, I pretended to be half asleep. He smiled, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Love you." I didn't respond, because in that moment I realized I was in love with a ghost, someone who looked like Jeffrey but belonged somewhere else. The next few days blurred together. I still went to work, still made dinner, still laughed at his stupid jokes when I had to. But something inside me had gone cold. At the clinic, I watched couples sit side by side in the waiting room. Small gestures like hands, brushing glances exchanged. And I thought I used to have that. Now I'm an afterthought. One night I got home early and found him on the couch texting. He looked up startled, then forced a smile. "Hey, babe. Who are you talking to?" I asked. "Just friends," he said too quickly. "Which ones?" He hesitated. "You wouldn't know them." That was the first time he lied outright. I saw it in his eyes, that flicker of guilt, followed by practiced calm. Something inside me hardened. That night while he showered, I opened his phone again. I didn't care about boundaries anymore. Boundaries didn't exist in a relationship built on deceit. Their latest messages were worse than before. He'd sent her a picture of the dinner I'd made captioned, "You'd make this better." "You're a way better cook," she replied. "Careful, your fiancé might hear that." My throat tightened. My food, our food, had become part of their flirting. Scrolling up, I found a photo Mara had sent a mirror. Selfie, her hair wet, wearing his hoodie. His hoodie. I recognized it instantly, dark gray frayed sleeves, the one that used to smell like him when I missed him during long shifts. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to smash something to make him feel even a fraction of what was clawing inside me. But I didn't. Instead, I quietly put the phone down and sat there in the dark, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the shower. When Jeffrey came out, he saw my face and frowned. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just tired." He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "You work too hard." The irony nearly made me laugh. I lay beside him that night, staring at the ceiling. The fan creaked softly above us, counting the seconds between each of his calm, careless breaths. I whispered to myself, "You're not crazy. You're not imagining this." Because I'd spent weeks doubting my instincts, telling myself he'd never do this. But now I had proof, pages of it. I knew what I had to do, but I wasn't ready yet, not emotionally. People think walking away is simple. But when your life is intertwined, when the bills, the car, the apartment are all shared, leaving isn't just emotional, it's logistical. Still, I decided something that night. The next time I looked into his eyes, I wouldn't flinch. I wouldn't cry. He'd see the truth he'd tried so hard to hide. I turned off the lamp and faced the wall, feeling his hand brush mine as he fell asleep. He didn't notice I pulled away. And as I stared into the darkness, the glow of his phone lit up again on the nightstand. Another message. Another lie. I whispered so softly only I could hear, "I think my engagement just ended and he doesn't even know it yet." Morning came heavy, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I went through the motions, brushed my teeth, made coffee, tied my hair, but my reflection in the mirror looked like someone rehearsing being fine. Jeffrey was humming in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like it was any other Sunday. It was almost comical how normal he seemed, how easy it was for him to live inside a lie. "Morning, babe," he said, smiling. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Morning." My throat was tight. I didn't know how to start. I had imagined this confrontation 100 times sometimes. I yelled, sometimes I cried, sometimes I walked out wordlessly. But standing there, all I felt was hollow. He handed me a plate. "Extra syrup, just how you like it." Something about that made my stomach twist. How could he remember something so small while forgetting the promise he made to love me? I set the plate down, untouched. "Jeffrey," I said quietly, "we need to talk." He froze, mid-motion, the spatula hanging in the air. That simple sentence always changes the air in a room. It's the sound of a bridge catching fire. He turned slowly, his face already pale. "What's wrong?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Mara." For a second, he didn't move. Then he blinked rapidly, trying to play dumb. "What about her?" "I saw your messages." My voice didn't even shake. All of them. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then laughed nervously. "Susie, you're seriously looking through my phone now. That's not okay." "Not okay," I cut in. "You're right. It's not. But neither is sneaking around with the woman you once told me you wanted to marry." His expression shifted from guilt to defensiveness. "It's not like that. We're just friends." I stared at him. Friends who send mirror selfies. Friends who wear each other's hoodies. Friends who say, "It's in your court now." He flinched. Just slightly, but I caught it. I kept going. Do friends also talk about how she'd make dinner better than me? Do they flirt while their fiancé sleeps in the next room? "Susie, you're twisting things," he said, his voice rising. "It's not what you think. She's been going through stuff. I was just being there for her." "Being there for her," I repeated, letting the words burn on my tongue. "What about being here for me?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead like I was the one exhausting him. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." "So it did go far," I said quietly. His silence confirmed it. My pulse roared in my ears. The world blurred for a moment. I thought I might faint, but anger steadied me. "You actually did it," I whispered. "You crossed the line." "It just happened," he muttered. I laughed, not from humor, but disbelief. "It just happened. You tripped and fell into someone else's arms." He looked down at the counter. "It was one time, I swear." I was confused. She reached out and it just... "Stop," my voice cracked. "Don't insult me with half-truths." "You weren't confused, Jeffrey. You were bored." He looked up sharply. "That's not fair." "What's not fair is lying to someone who trusted you completely," I said. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed calm. "I defended you to everyone. My friends said you were distant, that something felt off, and I said they were wrong. I told them you loved me." His eyes softened, maybe from guilt, maybe pity. "I do love you." "No," I whispered, stepping back. "You loved the idea of me. The version that made your life comfortable, the one who paid bills, cooked dinner, and made excuses for your absences. But me. The real me. You stopped seeing her the moment Mara texted you." He took a step forward, reaching out. "Please, Susie. I made a mistake, okay? I can fix this. We can fix this." I stepped away. "There's no we left to fix." He looked desperate now. It didn't mean anything. That's the worst part, I said. That I mean nothing to you either. The silence that followed was suffocating. He stared at me like I'd turned into a stranger. Maybe I had. Maybe this was the first time I'd stopped trying to protect him. I turned to leave, and that's when he panicked. You're not really walking out, are you? We can talk about this. I faced him one last time. Jeffrey, I can forgive mistakes, but I can't forgive patterns. He frowned. Patterns. Lying. Hiding. Choosing someone else's attention over mine. Those aren't accidents, they're habits. His mouth opened, but no words came out. I watched his face crumble, guilt, fear, regret, all tangled together. I gave you everything, I said quietly. My time, my trust, my love. You gave someone else my life story. He whispered, please don't go. But I already had. I packed my things that night. Just essentials, nothing sentimental. The engagement ring sat on the counter, cold under the kitchen light. I left it there, a perfect circle, broken by reality. He watched from the doorway, eyes red. Susie, please, don't do this. We can start over. Start over with what I asked softly. With the man who looked at me while loving someone else. He took a step closer, voice trembling. I'll block her. Delete everything. I'll prove it. I shook my head. You can delete messages, Jeffrey, not memories. I zipped my suitcase and walked past him. My heart felt like lead, but my legs kept moving. At the door, I turned and said the one thing I hadn't planned to. You didn't just lose me. You lost the version of yourself that I believed in. He didn't answer, just stood there staring as I closed the door behind me. The hallway outside was quiet, too quiet. I thought I'd cry, but nothing came. Only a strange stillness. Maybe this was peace, or maybe it was shock. Either way, it felt final. I drove through the night toward my parents' house, the ringless finger on my steering wheel catching faint moonlight. Somewhere between city lights and silence, I whispered to myself, he didn't just lose me. He was about to lose everything built with my hands. I didn't sleep that night. My parents' guest room felt too quiet, too safe for the kind of storm brewing inside me. I lay awake replaying every moment, the laughter, the dinners, the late-night I love yous that now felt like borrowed lines from someone else's play. By morning, something inside me had shifted. The pain was still there, raw and sharp, but underneath it, a new clarity took root. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about us. I was thinking about me. Over coffee, my mom asked softly, "You're not going back, are you?" I shook my head. No, not this time. And I meant it. That day I started listing everything I had built for him, the rent, the car, the bills, the plans. Piece by piece, I realized how much of our life together had been held up by me. I wasn't just his fiancé, I was his foundation. And he had cracked it himself. He hadn't called or texted yet. Maybe he knew I needed space. Maybe he was scared. Or maybe deep down he thought I'd forgive him like I always had. 3 days later, I drove back to the apartment. My hands gripped the steering wheel like I was holding onto the last bit of my old life. When I opened the door, Jeffrey was there, sitting on the couch, unshaven, eyes red like he'd been waiting for this confrontation. Susie, he breathed out, standing up quickly. Thank God. I've been losing my mind. Please just talk to me. I walked past him and set my keys on the table. I'm only here for my things. His face fell. You don't mean that. I do. He followed me down the hallway. I know I messed up. I know what I did was awful, but please don't throw everything away over one mistake. I turned sharply. One mistake. You've been choosing her for months. Every message, every secret, every night. You turned your phone face down. Those were choices, Jeffrey, not accidents. He looked stunned, like no one had ever spoken to him without cushioning the truth. I said I'd end it with her. I already did. Good, I said coldly. Then you'll have time to think about what you've lost. I opened the closet and started pulling out my clothes. My engagement dress, the one we picked together, was still in its plastic bag. It looked so pristine, so untouched, like it belonged to someone else's story. Susie, please, he said quietly. I can't lose you. I paused, looking at him. He really did look broken, eyes rimmed with guilt, shoulders slumped, voice trembling. Once that might have melted me, but now it just felt like a performance rehearsed too late. You didn't lose me today, Jeffrey, I said softly. You lost me the moment you stopped choosing me. He didn't reply. He just stood there, his silence louder than any apology could have been. I went to the kitchen to collect some paperwork, and that's when I noticed the small pile of unopened bills on the counter, rent, electricity, internet. All in my name. I exhaled, almost laughing at the irony. You couldn't even keep the lights on without me. He flinched. That's not fair. No, I said what's not fair is me paying for a home where I was being replaced one text at a time. I grabbed the stack and slipped it into my bag. I'll call the landlord. My name's coming off the lease. You can handle it yourself. Panic flashed across his face. Wait, I can't afford this place alone. Then you'll have to learn how to. Susie, come on, don't do this. You know how tight things are for me right now. I stared at him. Something inside me hardening. I know. That's why you stayed as long as you did, isn't it? You weren't in love with me? You were in love with stability. His jaw tightened. That's not true. Then prove it, I said. Start over, without me. He looked away, running his hands through his hair. You're really not going to give me a chance. I gave you years of chances, I said, and you used them to build an escape route. He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I can't do this alone. I took one last look at him, the man who once made me feel safe now, small in his own silence. You'll survive, I said quietly, just like I will. The difference is I'll actually live. When I turned to leave, he whispered something I almost didn't catch. I never thought you'd walk away. I paused at the door, looked back, and said, That's why I finally had to. Outside, the afternoon light hit my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I expected to feel empty, but I didn't. I felt powerful, steady. I got into my car, rolled down the window, and looked at the apartment building one last time. That space used to feel like a home. Now it looked like a shell hollow echoing with what-ifs. As I drove away, I whispered almost to myself, Freedom doesn't sound like revenge. It sounds like silence. And in that silence, I finally heard my own heartbeat again. 2 weeks passed. The air in my parents' house felt cleaner, lighter, maybe because I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. The quiet didn't hurt like I thought it would. It felt deserved, earned. I started working longer shifts at the clinic. There's something healing about helping strangers, people whose stories begin and end in the same day, who don't carry your past inside their eyes. It grounded me. Every bandage I wrapped, every comforting word I offered, somehow stitched a little piece of myself back together. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone waiting for a message from Jeffrey. I didn't care what he was doing, who he was with, or if he'd finally realized the weight of what he'd lost. My life was no longer orbiting around his gravity. But the universe has a way of sending echoes, small reminders of the past, just to see if you'll flinch. It came one Friday night when I stopped by a coffee shop after work. I was waiting for my drink when I overheard two women chatting behind me. Did you hear about Mara and that guy Jeffrey one said? My stomach tightened at the name, but I stayed still. Yeah. The other woman laughed. Apparently he moved in with her after his fiancé dumped him, and then she ditched him 2 weeks later. Total disaster. The world didn't spin this time. It didn't even sting. It just confirmed what I already knew. Karma had better timing than I ever could. I took my coffee, found a seat by the window, and let out a small laugh, not bitter, not vengeful, just the kind that slips out when the truth finally feels weightless. In the days that followed, I learned more through whispers and mutual friends. Mara had gone back to her ex. Jeffrey had lost the apartment because he couldn't afford rent without my name on the lease. The car I'd helped him buy was repossessed, and the freedom he'd chosen turned out to be lonelier than he expected. Apparently, he'd tried reaching out messages I never saw because his number had been blocked. One of my friends showed me a long text he'd sent to her asking if I'd at least read a letter he wrote. I didn't. I didn't need to. Because the truth is, closure doesn't come from the person who broke you. It comes from the moment you stop waiting for them to fix it. Still, one night, I found myself sitting by the window the same way I used to when Jeffrey worked late. Except this time the silence didn't feel like absence, it felt like peace. I thought about everything I'd lost and realized it wasn't much compared to what I'd gained. I'd gained honesty, self-respect, the ability to say no to being taken for granted. I remembered what my mother said to me when I first came home. Some people are lessons, not losses. Back then I didn't understand it. Now I did. Jeffrey had been a lesson in love without boundaries and giving too much, without asking for enough in return. And Mara, she was proof that people who steal what isn't theirs rarely know what to do with it once they have it. A few weeks later, I got a message from a mutual acquaintance who worked with Jeffrey. He told everyone he misses you, they said. He's a mess. I typed back, I'm not. Then I deleted the message before sending it. He didn't need to hear it, and I didn't need him to know. Because true revenge isn't anger, it's indifference. I moved into a small apartment near the hospital a month later. It wasn't fancy cracked walls, mismatched furniture, but it was mine. Every corner, every bill, every breath in that space belonged to me. One morning, while unpacking boxes, I found something wedged between old notebooks, a photo of Jeffrey and me. We were laughing, covered in flour from baking cookies on a random Tuesday. I stared at it for a moment, feeling that faint tug of nostalgia, not for him, but for the girl I used to be. The one who believed love could be fixed with effort alone. I folded the photo in half, tucked it into an envelope, and wrote on it, "Thank you for the lesson." Then I dropped it in the trash. That night I stood on my tiny balcony, the city lights shimmering below, and thought about how strange it was to feel lighter after losing so much. Because I hadn't really lost anything at all, just illusions. Jeffrey was probably somewhere replaying his mistakes, maybe blaming Mara, maybe blaming himself. But me, I was finally done replaying. Some endings don't come with fireworks or closure. They come quietly in a deep breath, a healed wound, a heart that no longer aches when it remembers. And as I turned off the light and let the room fade into soft darkness, I whispered to myself one final truth. Some lessons don't need revenge. Watching someone meet their own reflection is enough.